What a moment for all of us. All I would say is welcome back home, all of you, and welcome to Kansas City. This is the crossroads of America and the epicenter of ceramics. This milestone, our 50th anniversary in Kansas City, is likely to be remembered by all of us who are here tonight and by the folks who aren't here as maybe the world's best and largest family reunion ever. Isn't that it? All of the people and all of their working clay are present, and some are here in our hearts and minds, if not then their actual physical manifestation. Some have passed, leaving a void and a legacy. Some just couldn't get here this year, but you are here. You are the makers and the mentors. That's who you are. And just look around you. As you arrived in the Kansas City airport and on the train, in front of you and behind you, people in line and elevators and in bars and restaurants, we look a little different, don't we? At 6,000 or more, when the dust settles, we gather. Our teachers, our students, our technicians, our collectors, our suppliers, our writers, our critics, gathered as one, bound by clay. As your president for a few more days, being here at this conference and this anniversary is almost a religious experience for me. On a more personal note, I grew up in a small town in southern Appalachia, in Bluefield, West Virginia, and among other things I did, I played an old upright piano for the congregation at Thompson's Chapel Methodist Church, about 6 miles outside of town in the suburbs of Bluefield. And one of everyone's favorite hymns there reminds me of this gathering. I was going to sing it, but I just can't do it. But I can read it. And it's an old hymn, and if some of you know it, you can sing it. It goes, "Blessed be the tie that binds." Does anybody know this? Blessed be the tie that binds our hearts in perfect love. The fellowship of kindred minds is like to that above. In this simple hymn, the fellowship of kindred minds has so much metaphorical resonance for us. As the poem suggests, the fellowship is like to that above. In other words, it is imbued with the Spirit, and that is the divine. At our best teaching, our work in clay is the tie that binds. It's centered in creativity and empathetic teaching, in authenticity of process, responsible use of materials and energy, and more than that, the joy of engendering possibility for ourselves and for others. And when we come together as the mentors and the makers at NCECA, we share a baseline for understanding, don't we? It in many ways is our collective and our family DNA. And coming together as a fellowship of kindred minds right now in Kansas City, our 50th year gives us sources of artistic and historical and cultural significance that we can adopt, share, absorb, celebrate, and take home. And be sure to plant those seeds at home. We will see new work at Nelson Atkins, at Sherry Leedy Gallery, at Arts KC, all over the Kansas City Art Institute, and scores of other galleries. Tonight, we will have the joy of hearing Liz Lerman's keynote. We have the round table tomorrow, And be sure to peruse your conference app and choose among those panels and lectures that will enrich your life, pique your curiosity, and amplify your own studio practice. Most of all, get to know the others around you that are seated near you tonight. They are here because you are here, and you are the reason there is NCECA. In 1961, there were 22 of us. And some of those people are here tonight. They worked for those 5 years. They worked for those 5 years, and in 1966, NCECA was born. I know that some of you are here. 1961 to 1966. Could you stand? Could you stand? Are a few of you here? Let's look. There we go. Let's look. Let's look. Okay, now everybody else stand with them because we are one. We are one. Thank you. All you founders, be proud, be proud. I'm a founder myself, Baltimore Clay Works in the late 70s, and I am happiest when the organization thrives. And when it falters, as all organizations do occasionally, I try to forgive and try to help. And our founders are the same way. But now in this place and this time, cherish what has happened since that meeting at the Royal York Hotel in Toronto in 1961. Think of the thousands of lives transformed by clay because you, our founders, held the course. This is our 50th milestone, brothers and sisters. Rejoice in the moment. We are the makers and we are the mentors. Make this your week to engage, connect, and enjoy your reunion. Thank you so much. And now I would like to introduce the king and queen of the NCECA ceramics program here in Kansas City, our on-sites, Paul Donnelly and Amy Duke.
Welcome to Kansas City, everybody. My first conference experience happened in 1992 when the conference was in Philadelphia, PA. And I was in undergraduate school at the time, and unknowingly, well, I was on spring break, and I unknowingly went down to the Clay Studio in Philadelphia, and all of the exhibitions were happening that were coinciding with the conference. And there were two really amazing things that I learned from that experience. The first one is that I was introduced to modes and methodologies of working that I'd never been exposed to before, and saw things that I didn't even think were possible within the medium. And it was a really eye-opening experience. The second thing that happened that was really a really transformable experience was that there was this community there that was around, and this energy at the shows. And it was that moment that when I went back to school, I knew that I could do something in the ceramic arts and pursue this as a career. There is just such a great community through NCECA that has happened over the last 50 years. It's really incredible. I think that this, Amy and I have worked really hard as the local liaisons to help coordinate things in the city, but the whole community came together to bring this conference. And that includes this fantastic board that, has really looked at a lot of the programming, the staff, that has worked tirelessly, all of the volunteers that are volunteering their time, and then, of course, all of you guys that are here to participate and put on exhibitions and give presentations and to really help to expand our minds while we're here. So I'm going to turn it over to Amy.
Okay. Thanks so much, Paul, and thanks to all of you. I thought I would tell you about my first time with NCECA as well. So I became involved in NCECA by accident, actually. The week that my husband and I moved to Kansas City was the very same week that NCECA last graced and embraced Kansas City, back in 2002. We didn't know a soul here, but we found ourselves immersed in a culture of creativity. We lived just 3 houses away from the Kansas City Art Institute ceramics building, so very much immersed. And there were artists everywhere, and there was just such an energy and enthusiasm and effervescent spirit that was what I soon learned was NCECA. It was all of you that was out there walking about the city and really animating the landscape of my new hometown. So whether this is your first NCECA or your 15th NCECA or your 50th NCECA or something in between, may it be a memorable one and a meaningful exchange of ideas. I, as I said, kind of came to NCECA sideways. I'm a museum educator. I'm not a maker. But I think what NCECA does for building a community of artists and a community of practice is replicated and scaled to the community at large when a conference of this size and this importance and all of the associated activities that are hosted in your town arrive and embrace you in this way. So in other words, having NCECA here is sort of like holding a mirror up to the community and reflecting the ways that clay and the ceramic arts touches all of our lives.
So we really would like to just thank a number of people here before we leave who really helped to bring the conference back to Kansas City. For its first time. Irma Starr is one of those people. Linda Lighton is another one of those people. Also, Catherine Footer is another one of those people that really helped to coordinate things on. And I'd also like to thank Catherine for co-curating the exhibition at the Nelson Atkins. And we'd also like to thank Erin Woodworth at Lady Volka's Art Center and Amy Kligman from Charlotte Street Foundation for supporting a lot of NCECA exhibition programming.
There are so many ways to support the organization. You just heard about a couple of them, and there are also very generous donors to NCECA here in Kansas City. I would like to thank Dick Belger and Evelyn Kraft Belger for their generous support that allowed us to do things that we wouldn't otherwise be able to do. And Ann Brocker and Brocker's Good Earth Clay, who's a longtime friend and supporter of NCECA, and to artists worldwide, also as a supplier. And Ann's daughter, Cindy. Where's Cindy?
Please stand up.
Stand up. There's Cindy. There's our honorary on-site liaison and NCECA board member in the communications arena and many other arenas. But she really worked tirelessly behind the scenes at every turn, right alongside both Paul and myself. And I need to thank Paul Donnelly, this guy right here, my co-conspirator, for inviting me to join him on this ceramic odyssey, if you will. He really did an entire year's worth of work before I even knew that this was a possibility, and I'm just so very lucky to ride alongside him on this wave, so thank you. I, too, want to echo Paul's sentiments and thank the NCECA board and staff for the many things that they do. When I was looking at the program, I realized we just did this little slice. Who did all this other stuff? It is such a multifaceted organization and conference, and you all have the NCECA staff and board to thank for that. I want to thank my personal circle of support, my husband, Jesse DiMartino, who's out there somewhere. He is a wellspring of sage advice, patience, and good humor, and an artist himself. And I want to thank the Spencer Museum of Art, my home institution, especially my director, Sarah Lynn Reese-Hardy, who is also out there in the crowd. Woo! And Margaret Perkins McGinnis for supporting my service to you. Although we are undergoing a renovation at the Spencer Museum at this time, this is my personal invitation to all of you to come back this fall when we reopen and see our ceramic collections. Finally, I wish to thank Mark Sutherland. He and an amazing all-star team of artists are going to bring tonight's Randall session to life for all of you.
And I would also like to thank the Kansas City Art Institute for their continued support through this 3-year process, and my wonderful department chair, Carrie Esser, who gave me a lot of support through the process. And finally, Rain Harris. He stuck through me by my side through all this. Well, we're here. Welcome to Kansas City. It's time to celebrate.
P.S. We get to introduce to you NCECA's Executive Director, Josh Green, and NCECA incoming President, Chris Staley.
Wow, what a crowd. What a beautiful, happy, interesting crowd. I'm so excited to see this happen. It's been a lot of years of hard work and days of excitement building up to it, and Chris and I are going to try to be very prompt because we're already running a little bit behind. I wanted to acknowledge some more support from the National Endowment for the Arts, the W.T. Kemper Foundation, the Chipstone Foundation, the Wingate Foundation, I think Arts KC, and the Neighborhood Tourism and Development Fund. This city has truly embraced NCECA, and we're very grateful for that. I want to talk a little bit about the conference name, Makers, Mentors, and Milestones, and I think it was our twin Pauls at the time, Paul Donnelly and Paul Sacharides, that I remember being responsible for a lot of the wordsmithing. And I think the makers part is pretty obvious, and we are a community of makers, and we thought long and hard about putting that word first in its order, about being about the present and being about us collectively. The milestones is a pretty concrete idea that reaching 50 is a pretty concrete one, and something I think that we can all visualize or relate to, no matter if we're much younger or much older. But the mentorship part is a little bit hard to get your hands on. And as somebody who has certainly benefited from mentors and benefited a lot as a mentor, I think that one of the unique things about it is that it's a form of teaching and knowledge transfer that goes both ways. And mentors are people in our lives who may connect with us for an extended period of time, and they may be just for a very short period of time, even just briefly a conference. I first met George Kokos at an NCECA conference, who is one of NCECA's founders here, who stood up a moment ago. And he participated and led one of the most amazing, transformative ceramic learning experiences I've had in my life. I think I first experienced briefly meeting Chris Staley when I first got out of graduate school, and even though I was never his student, I still think of him as a mentor. Most of all, I think about mentorship as being a strange tension along a continuity between love and kind of pushing, right? Pushing us out of our comfort zone. And I think a lot about my dad, who in my early childhood used to whisper to me, sugar zero, sugar zero, sugar zero, which was his way of saying sweet nothings. And as I got a little bit older and encountered some of the difficulties of life, I remember him saying to me, non illegitimi carborundum sunt, which is Latin for don't let the bastards wear you down. And I think it's that wonderful tension, between those things that he brought into my life about realism, sweetness, love, respect, unconditional support. That is really what this community is about. And I'm so pleased that you're here, and I'm so pleased that this is the subject of this conference. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Chris to introduce Liz.
Just a couple of nuts and bolts. You might, if you haven't already turned off your cell phones for the presentation is about to happen. Also, I was asked to announce some people have lost credit cards and cell phones, and if you happen to have lost that, go to the NCECA desk, the registration desk, tomorrow morning at 9, and there's a good likelihood that they'll have them, and ask for Jackie. Okay, I have the honor of introducing Liz Lerman, and I would venture to say that most everyone in this room, or certainly the large majority, has at some point participated in a critique, either having your word critiqued or actually been a teacher, or both. And Liz Lerman, who is the keynote speaker tonight, wrote a seminal, probably the most important essay ever written about critique called Critical Response about 20 years ago. But she happens to be many hats, and she actually recently has been hired by Arizona State University, and the announcement was the dance legend Liz Lerman will be joining us and be an advocate and leader for the arts and bringing arts to an interdisciplinary way in science and all the subjects at Arizona University. She started a dance company in 1976 titled Dance Exchange, and it was revolutionary in the fact that everyone can dance of all ages, shapes, and sizes, and she really brought that to the field. And then in 2002, she was awarded a MacArthur Genius Fellowship Award. And without further ado, I just would like to say, I would assume that most of us think we're very open-minded and creative. And with her presentation, I would keep that in mind as she gives her presentation. And I'd like to give a very warm welcome to Liz Lerman. We're lucky to have her here.
Hi, everybody. It's amazing to be here. I've never seen anything like this in the performing arts world. It is truly remarkable to be in your presence. And one way I would measure that is we've been together about 20 minutes, and I would say 15 minutes of that was taken up with saying thank you. I don't know that every community gathers around gratitude that way. And it's really something. I'm wondering, how many of you have been in a position in your life to give someone some feedback of some kind? You can just raise your hand. And how many of you have been in a position to receive feedback? And how many of you have any discomforts about either side of that? Yeah. So we're going to be talking tonight about something called the critical response process, and specifically, and more generally and more broadly, about what we mean by speaking to each other and talking to each other. And I just want to say that the critical response process does not take care of those discomforts. It helps. It makes us conscious, but it doesn't solve it, because actually the giving and getting of feedback is a very special thing. And I just love that we've already heard from Josh about love and about respect, about mentoring being a two-way street. The thing about this feedback is, particularly in our world, our creative worlds, how hard it is to nourish this creative spirit and at the same time demand and challenge it. And that's some of what I would hope to be able to do. I gave a talk recently about critical response to something called the International Conference of Conservatories. So it was people from all over Europe and Scandinavia dealing with the really high-end performing conservatories. And I was a little worried. It took place in the UK, and I said to them, okay, I'm an American, and I'm afraid that you're going to think that this is just American do-goodism. Or maybe you're going to think it's American feel-goodism, or maybe you'll think it's just American colonialism. And actually, I had a little worry about that tonight as well. because this is just one set of ideas and practices, and I know that everybody in this room has been thinking a lot about these things, probably most of your creative lives, and that many of you have beautiful strategies, beautiful ways, methods of working with each other. So I don't bring this as a critique, as much as an offering, and this thought that we live in a time where speech is really being challenged. We live in a time where the definition of honesty is say whatever I want in whatever way I want to, and no matter how much it hurts you and no matter what it means to you, because I'm being honest. We live in a time when that definition is thriving. We live in a time when how we become conscious about how we disagree. And after all, critique is full of disagreement, is it not? It's full of disagreement about things that we're passionate about. So how do we do this? And I'm hoping that you'll find that the process that I'm going to put forward to you, and then we're going to actually practice this. You're not going to have to listen. You're going to get to actually do it for a little bit. We're going to be in the Guinness Book of World Records, the most people practicing critical response at the same moment. And you can test it out and see what you think about it. But before I get into it, I'd like to just a little preface. It's hard to know how to sort of hold the room here, you guys. It's so big. I really like Nobel Week, you know, when they give the Nobel Prizes. And one reason I like it is because these incredible people who've been obsessing about some small something or other for their entire lives get recognized. And then you hear on the radio like 10 seconds about what that is. It's not even a TED Talk, like 20 minutes, you know, it's 10 seconds. And I'm always interested in what fragments they pull out. Well, I was driving a few years ago, and I don't even know which scientist this was who got it, but he said, I'm getting the Nobel because I've rattled around in other people's universes. And I really love that. I feel a little bit like I'm rattling in yours tonight. I mean, we share a lot of common ground, but we're also quite distinct. And I wanted to say that so much of our life in the arts right now is about us rattling around in other universes. That many of us are looking at our work in its purest forms, but also what does it mean when we take this work into different disciplines, different parts of our communities, different parts of our schools, and how really fantastic that is. It emboldens us. It gives us new insight about what's powerful about what we do. It helps us maybe understand something we didn't know before because it's in a new context. But it's also really challenging. We don't understand each other. We make mistakes. We step on people's toes. And so I talked to your mayor. The mayor, I met him at the reception tonight, and I went up to talk to him for a second, and I just said, I was really curious what he would say about political speech. So I asked him about that. And he said, well, I don't really get into that like that. He said, I'm a collaborator. So this thing about collaborating brings us yet again to how are we talking to each other? What skills do we need? And I'm advocating that in our creative practices, we already have so many things to offer, including this idea of mentoring. Tonight, we'll just practice one particular form of that. Just by way of sort of representing myself, I'll just say that I had intended to become a dancer in the conventional way in which I was trained. But things happened along the way, and in my 20s, when my mother died rather suddenly of cancer, I decided to make a piece about that, and that set me into, well, finding old people. I'm not going to get into the whole story, but I'll just simply say that I found some old people to be in a piece because I wanted them to welcome her into wherever she had gone. And the upshot was that I spent 10 years in this one senior center figuring out what old bodies and dance had to do with each other. And it completely and totally changed my life. This is what happened, though. People said to me something like this. So Liz, I have to use the stand now. That work that you're doing, the work you do at the Kennedy Center, because we were starting to tour major theaters, that's up here. And the work you're doing in the nursing homes, senior centers, that's down here. I mean, this is really art. And okay, you want to do that, okay. Or people said this to me, right? They said, okay, that stuff you're doing in the community, that is so fantastic. Why are you still performing in theaters? It's white, it's old, it's rich, it's European, give it up. Right? So why would I want to choose? It's such an impoverished way of thinking to me, so I did this, which is really easy to do with my hands, right? Right. And the thing is, once I did that, it was so incredibly liberating for so many reasons. I began to see that we actually learn our behaviors in this world, but we're trying to live in this world. So let me show you what I mean. In this world, if you want to make a distinction, you literally can't make it without putting down the thing you're distinguishing. Like, if I just wanted to say to you, there's a distinction between, say, dance therapy and dancing community. It's not a major big deal, but I'm telling you, in this world, it's a big deal. Whereas if you go like this, you can make distinctions without rancor. And making distinctions is so creative, and it's essential to how we see each other. Once I realized this, we do this about all kinds of things. Individual, collective, I suppose art and craft, I suppose teaching artists, non-teaching artists, working mothers, non-working mothers. It's endless. And I'm just saying that we want to try to live here. But living here is demanding. It demands new behaviors, new skills, new ways of seeing. And it has about it a multiplicity and an ambiguity that is pretty curious. In times of trouble, in times of unknowingness, people like to revert to this. They just do. There's the president of ASU, where I'm going to be, I heard him give a talk last week, all these concentric circles about how fantastic the university is. And then the whole last outer ring, he just put down TBD, to be determined, because as he says, and many educators say, we don't know what the future is. We're training our students for a world we don't understand. Well, in times like that, people revert to a kind of authority. And I'm going to advocate again that our creative processes help us live in this horizontal, if we can name them, if we can know them. Because the creative process itself is so both open and closed. And critique is one form of that we're going to focus on with the remaining of the time I have with you. I'll just say one last thing about this horizontal, and that is that as I began to work in the senior centers, and then I got asked to do all these other amazing things in communities like shipyards, schools, hospitals, and still performing and touring internationally, people would say to me, but Liz, you're just so fragmented. And I would say back, well, no, actually, the world is fragmented. I'm not. I'm just being the whole artist that I want to be. And I'm just letting my art form be the whole art that it is. And I think holding on to that idea of the big embrace helps us then when we look at some of these other things. So, critical response process is a way of giving feedback. The way I'm defining feedback is this. Good feedback is the kind where you cannot wait to get back to the studio. Like, just get me back there, I'm going to work. Now, I know that I can extract that from feedback that I've gotten that's been pretty brutal. It might take me 5 years, but I can get there. But I'd like to advocate that we can get there faster. So just briefly, I was raised first as a classical dancer. And in classical forms, you're either right or wrong, mostly wrong. That is the definition of classicism, and by the way, I loved it. It was fantastic. You know, you'd spend a million hours just trying to get your leg to go from here to here. It was incredible. But I have to say, even as a child, I knew that there was something a little wrong when the feedback brutalized the person. I mean, I didn't have any language for it. I didn't know what it was. I just knew that it didn't have to be that bad. I wanted to be great, but I didn't know that it had to hurt that much to get there. I would not have made critical response if that was the end of it. I simply would have built my strategies. Like I say, I think we all build our strategies, both for the giving and receiving of critique. But when I left ballet over a long period of time and pushed back and began to do contemporary forms, other things began to happen, one of which is that it wasn't so clear what was right or wrong. And it got really confusing to me, because I didn't actually understand on what basis I was being told things. So I had a kind of troubled soul about the whole thing. But, you know, I plowed on. And then when I got out of school, something interesting happened. It was just that I didn't get any feedback except from the newspapers. This is at a time when there were newspapers and there were critics. The Washington Post had 4 dance critics when I started out. 4. I mean, there are probably not 4 paid dance critics in the country now. So it was interesting because I realized that the critic's job was not to make me be a better choreographer. I mean, it was not their job to get me to go back to the studio again. They had other business to attend to when they were reviewing my work. But I really yearned for some feedback. And then I started to turn to my own community. And here I think I loved hearing about all the family and all the communal feelings you guys have and everything. But it's interesting to be of a community and to be competitive within that community. And I think that that's, what time is it? 10:00. Okay, I have to move faster. Suffice it to say that a series of things happened to me between then and what became the critical response process. Deep frustration. The one I really want to tell you about is that when we began touring, they would bring me in to do master classes, and I was supposed to look at young people's work. Well, I was young too, but look at young people's work and say something to them about it. And here's my question. I had plenty to say, but it was based on making them be like me, not based on making them be like them. That became the puzzle. On what basis and how could I do that? The other thing is that, you know, I had really strong aesthetics. I had really big ideas about art. It was political. There were old people dancing. The dancers were talking. I mean, I had all these crazy ideas. You didn't see that anywhere. So you know what? I didn't like anything. I liked my work. So there's something about how do we tame this part of ourselves, or how do we bring that part of ourselves into true, authentic relationship with other people? So in a particular summer, we were at 2 different dance festivals, one very, very high-end and one very funky, and everybody was talking about critique. This was maybe in the late 70s, early 80s, and I asked permission. I said, I'm beginning to work on something. I'd like to come and bring this. And so I spent a year thinking about it, and we tested it the next summer at these 2 festivals. And here's what I asked myself. Why is it there's some people I could hear anything from? Absolutely. Didn't matter. They could yell. I could take it and hear it. And I wondered, was it something about the relationship that made that true? I also wondered, was there something about the conditions? I mean, had we broken bread together? Was there something about the timing of it? And I wondered, was there something I had done to prepare myself? I don't have a lot of time to get into this with you, but I would say that if you think about this in your own lives, if you go away and say, when have I had that kind of feedback or what's going on, I'm pretty sure you'll be able to pull out of those personal stories what is the essence of critical response. What I heard a lot of was about the word trust. And if you probe with people, you say, what do you mean by trust? They'll tell you things like, well, the person has my back. The person cares about the work. They don't care if I make a mistake. They're going to be there for me. There's something, it's hard to describe. It changes every day. But I just want to say, if there is trust, almost everything can happen. even though we have trouble understanding what the word is. People would say things like respect. I want to, and here they're all over the map. Sometimes respect is I want to respect the other person's work. Sometimes the respect was somebody naive who's never met me. It's very interesting how that plays out. And finally, I would say the third thing is that people seemed interested in the role of the artist in the critique. What's my role in it? What if I don't want to talk about the thing they want to talk about? What if I came to talk about this? How do we work that out? So based on all these conversations, I developed the critical response process. I'm now going to describe to you what it is, and then we're going to try it, okay? So in critical response, can I just see, has anybody done it? Have anybody in this room familiar with it? A few of you. Okay, all right, good, good. There are three roles in critical response. There's the maker, the artist, and you can do a critical response about everything, including dinner, because everybody makes something every day. So the makers, we'll call them the artist. There's a responder, the people who will be responding to the art. And then there are facilitators. Anybody can facilitate critical response. We've got people in the second grade doing it. I'm going to mostly run you through your paces tonight. However, we have a group of NCECA people who've practiced the process a little bit, and they're around to help you guys. Where are you? Can you stand up, wave your arms? You're in various locations. There they are. They may come help you as we go to work on this. Thank you very much for your support, you guys. Okay, three roles. There's a lot of different ways to prepare. The only thing I want to say is that I have time to talk about now is when you gather to do a critical response process with somebody, you gather because you want them to do their best work, not their almost best work. Not their almost best work so your work is still better. I say, it's true. This drive, this ambition, and it's critical to who we are. But how do we harness it and how do we use it? And I'm saying it's a relief to be in a place where you decide that's not going to be an action right now. I'm leaving that outside the door. I'm here for you, especially because we're going to trade places. Because in critical response, you sort of reciprocate all the time. Okay, there are 4 steps. After the person has shown a work in progress, and you all can start dreaming about what little work in process you might want to discuss with your neighbor, because that's what we're going to work on, so you can start thinking about that. The very first step is statements of meaning. This is when you let the person know how you've experienced their work, what is meaningful about that. Meaning is super big. What's interesting, provocative? Well, here, let's pretend for a minute the architect was here of this room, and we were going to tell them what's meaningful about the space, in this space, right? If I said to you what's beautiful about it, just notice what might be something beautiful in the room for you. And if I said what was curious about it, what might you notice? Something interesting? Something memorable? Maybe a memory you had is coming up? Something that's making you uncomfortable about it? Did you come up with different things, depending on what I asked? Yeah, meaning's big. So in step 1, you let the person know what's meaningful. However, there's a filter. And the filter is you filter out the discomforts. You're not going to share the discomforts first. It doesn't mean you don't have them. You have them. You have them. They're going to inform you. They're part of the process. This is not a judge-free process. We want our judgments. It's just we're not going to draw on them first because you know what? We don't know enough about them yet. We haven't explored that yet. But we start with what's meaningful. For some people, that already makes the whole process a problem. I think it goes to that idea that you want to bring your whole self, and part of your whole self is the negative part. Here's where language is so poor. This positive-negative isn't very helpful because even the negative is positive. Do you know what I mean? We know that hearing the things that are difficult actually helps us grow. But in this first step, promise me, the act of being able to filter out the negative and the discomfort is so powerful. Let me ask you, how many of you in your own work, how early does negativity start? How early? Before you even sit down, right? Imagine if you had the skill and the practice to filter it out for a moment. You're not going to not listen to it, you're just not going to listen to it right then. That's step one. Step two, the artist asks his or her questions. So the maker goes next. When they ask their question, that filter's gone. So if I said to you, what do you think about the ending of my dance? You could say, oh, Liz, it's really great, blah, blah, blah. Or you could say, it's not very good, I don't like it, here's why. Okay? You can answer. But there is a new filter in step two, and that is you have to stay on topic. You can't change the subject. So if I say to you, what do you think about the ending of my dance? You can't say to me, your ending's fine, but your hair is ugly. Can't do it. Imagine, I know you've all had this experience, I would go into, my daughter would invite me into her room to help her with her homework. Did not give me permission to tell her to clean up her room. That was not the invitation. And if I did it, what happened? No homework, no clean room, no nothing. So if you stay on topic, it's amazing what happens. Step three, responders are going to ask their questions, okay? You get to ask the artist your question. Here's the thing, though, new filter. In step three, the questions need to be neutral. This means you cannot embed your opinion in the question. Why? Because sometimes if you don't take the work to figure out what the problem is, you actually inundate the artist with like 3 or 4 or 5 opinions right there. You're also trying to build a relationship with the artist, and it's so interesting when you figure out how to ask a neutral question. You know, we've spent years working on this and weeks teaching it, so we're going to practice it for 3 minutes. And you may find this a little bit of a struggle, but I just urge you to give it a whirl and try it when we get to that part and see what you think about it. What I find in step 3 is that it's an opportunity for responders to reconsider their aesthetics in this moment, in this time, in relationship to this thing that's in front of me. And I really love that. Step 4. I have an opinion about the ending of your dance, Liz. Would you like to hear it? And the artist can say yes or no in the formal critical response, which we're going to do. Here's the thing. If I told you something meaningful in step 1, if I answered your question in step 2, if I asked you a question in step 3, do you think the artist is going to want your opinion? Yeah, they will, unless you want to give them an opinion about something they're not interested in. Because you're building this respect, trusting relationship that we talked about at the beginning. So that is a very, very rough version of critical response, but maybe just enough for us to get going on it. So here's what I'm going to ask you to do. This is a big experiment, and I'm so excited. In a second, you're going to get a partner. Don't do it yet. You'll have 2 people, maybe 3. I think 4 will be too many, so 2 or 3. Here's the problem. If you're in a row, and this person goes this way, and this person goes that way, and you're alone, you will hate critical response. Just be so mad. Okay, so don't let that happen. Just join a group or whatever. Now, we're gonna test it this way. And you know, I did say I didn't want to be a colonialist. I'm going to ask you all to try it. But of course, you're in charge of your time, and if you decide not to, that's fine. But what I'd like you to do is to get with your partner, and the only thing I'm going to have you do for just like 30 seconds, is practice all those step 1s you did about the room, just to get used to what it's going to be like in here. So you're going to find your partner, you're going to talk about what was meaningful about this room, and I'm going to call you back in about 30 seconds, all right? Go. Okay, you guys, great. That's really good. Really good. So everybody found somebody? And if you didn't, please just insert yourself. I think of it as active belonging. You just join a group. So I'm belonging here, okay? All right, good. So now we're going to work on the process. We're going to take about 3 minutes for each of the steps. That's about how much time we have. I'd like to start this way. Can you bring to mind something you're working on? A work in progress, maybe it's a new curriculum you're thinking about. Maybe what you're wearing tonight is a work in progress. Maybe it's just an idea you have. Maybe you're partway through something. Just bring something to mind, okay? And then in a second, I'm going to ask you to go back to the person you were just talking to. One of you will be the maker. The other of you will be the responder. And if there are 3 of you, then 2 of you will respond, 1 maker. We're only going to be able to go in one direction tonight, okay? That's the name of a band, isn't it? Okay. No, okay. All right. So, Tony is here, and I think we have a visual, which I hope will help to keep the 3-minute timing. We'll put that video up in a second. But when you get to your partner, decide quickly who's going to tell about their work in progress. Talk about it. Actually, let's do 4 minutes. We'll do the 4-minute one. You need 4 minutes. Not more than 2 minutes to talk, though. And then the other 2 minutes, you're going to tell them what's meaningful about it. And you guys, don't start asking questions. Don't. Stay in the meaning world, even if you have to repeat yourself 4 times. Stay in the meaning. See if you can draw out. And for the person listening, just try to take that in. I'm sorry, I just got a sign that says we have to do 3 minutes. So we're going to work really fast, okay? Go to your partners and go. Step 1. Keep going. You still have 1 minute and 35 seconds. Okay, that's the 3 minutes. I'm so sorry to interrupt you. That was great. So usually when we're working and beginning the process, it's interesting to take a little bit of time to reflect on what just happened. What did you notice about this first step? And I think one thing I love to find out is what kinds of things did people say, because there's so many ways into art. And this is where, for those of you in pedagogical environments, this step can be so interesting, because if you track what people say in step 1, you start understanding the names with which they give their entry point. Like you might have talked about color or texture or friendship, or there's so many different, and then once you start naming those things, you can start to catalyze people to look at art that way. The one thing to be careful, I think, in step 1 is sometimes people will say, well, I just got a lot of compliments. I don't know if that happened and if you did that. But my sense of that word is that if you call something a compliment, you will dismiss it. And I don't think that this meaning is dismissible. There's just so much power in beginning with giving us a chance to re-experience the art itself. So that's part of the practice of that first step. Okay, so we're going to go on. And Tony, I think we'll keep them at 3 minutes, just for the sake of time. So step 2, the artist asks his or her question, and responders, you answer. Remember now, you answer completely across the board. Just don't change the subject. What you will find, because responders, you want to do such a good job, that often you want to ask a question right away. But if I knew this, I could answer that better. Actually, in real life, you might go back and forth between the 2 steps. But for now, stick to the rigor. Just see what happens. Answer the best you can. And just, see what happens. So we're going to step 2. Artists ask their question. Responders, let them know what you think. Go. Okay. Excellent job, everybody. Thank you for ending mid-sentence like you're doing. I neglected to tell you that these great people that worked with John Borstel, who's an associate of mine with Critical Response, who's here and will be on the panel tomorrow, are here to help. So if you run into a snag or if you want to just have an extra thought about how it's going, you just have to raise your hand, make yourself seen, and there are about 12 or 15 of them around, which, by the way, could we all just clap for them? Because they, yeah, thank you, thank you. Good. All right, so now we're getting to the third step. This is this question about neutrality, and some of how you, I mean, there's a lot to say about the theory, but one of the things about being able to ask a neutral question is that if you ask a question in which the opinion is embedded, what happens to the person? They get defensive. And in my opinion, once you're defensive, the learning is over. It's done. Because you'll spend your time talking about what you already know. And what you hope in the third step is that you bring this artist to actually a place they don't know, which can be scary. And in fact, one of the way artists solve it is they start talking about everything they know anyway, rather than to let themselves live in this place that you get them to help them really dream something they haven't thought before. In the 3 minutes you have, you may just stumble around. I just want to say, don't be silent because you're worried you're going to be wrong. We're not going to, police the system. The system's there to help the feedback. So just try. Sometimes it's about just changing the beginning of a sentence, like it's not even asked as a question. You can say, well, can you talk about that part where you're thinking about? And the person will start going. And just listen hard to what they're saying, because you may want to do a follow-up question, or it may help you with your opinion. The other thing, this is a little bit subtle, but you don't have to wait till step 4 to give your opinion. What you want to do is to turn your opinion into a neutral question. You can do that with every single opinion you hold. Again, it's an act of you getting to work with your own ideas, but it's very interesting because it will lead you to be able, if you still have the opinion after you've listened to them, to be much more surgical in what you're saying. You don't have to give the big dramatic thing. You be really surgical because you're going to know what's on their mind. So give it a whirl. Step 3, 3 minutes, neutral questions. Go. And raise your hand if you need help. Great. Thank you. Was that interesting? Yeah, I hope so. Okay, we're going to do the last step. In this step, it's kind of a ritual. I have an opinion about, and you say what it's about. Would you like to hear it? And what it does is it gives people a chance to prepare themselves for what they're going to hear. As my friend John likes to say, if you throw somebody a bowling ball, and if you throw them a feather, you prepare differently, right? So it's like a way to be ready to take it. And it is okay to say no. Those of you giving the opinion, it's also okay to just give it. Like, we've worked so hard for this. It's all right to say I have an opinion about the ending of your dance list. It really doesn't work, and here's why I think it doesn't work. Well, you say it. You don't have to go, I really like you, Liz, but, no. Just say it, if they give you permission, okay? We're going to take 3 minutes. You may not have 3 minutes worth of opinions, so you can also take the last minute or so just to talk about the process with each other. What did you find out? What was it like? Or what questions you have, because we'll have time for a little bit of questions when we complete it, all right? So try step 4. Go. So welcome back. Welcome back. We have time for just a few questions. If people have some comments and/or questions they'd like to ask, there's some microphones around. It would be really great to hear from people. And then I want to finish with a quick little story. But yes, let's just start. Will you say who you are, please?
Hi, I'm David Henley. I wondered if you could give us a concrete example of...
Of going from here to here? Yeah. Well, when my mother died, was dying, my world was, it was awful. And I had spent the previous 10 years leaving classical ballet. I did not want anything to do with it. But when she was dying, I went back to ballet class. It was like I was so hungered for something concrete and specific and where everything was clear. And that helped me understand that it wasn't about me just leaving ballet, actually. It was about the fact that sometimes I needed that orthodoxy, depending on when it was. And that actually it was the context that was changing things for me, and that I should draw on the strengths of everything I had. And that's an example of when so to truly do this, you kind of have to look at what's at the other end of the spectrum and see what's there. Sometimes, though, I like to think of it as a circle, and they're actually right next door neighbors, like the relationship, say, between postmodern gesture and some of the indigenous dance forms. They are like next door neighbors. You don't have to cross the pathway, just go. So I hope that helps. And I have a book called Hiking the Horizontal. There's a lot in there that'll tell you about that. Yes.
So you've talked about trust, and trust being an important ingredient of the critique process. How would you, there's a lot of educators in this room, could you expound on that a little bit in terms of how someone that's trying to teach establishes that sense of trust between teacher and student?
Well, actually, I want to say that step one helps a lot. That finding a way to specifically let people know that they have meaning and that their presence matters is one thing. But a little piece of this is the question about when are we open to being influenced? Like, I feel as a teacher gratified when I can be open to the influence of my students. Not that I have been found out as not knowing something. So maybe engendering that trust is being open to the fact that we actually don't know everything and watch us learn. That helps to start build that really, and I know it's really hard in the classrooms given everything that we have to accomplish, but I do think that those two things, being open to influence, really trying to see the student for who he or she is, and allowing them to participate in their own growth, which that step 2 does. It is so powerful when they start saying, well, I want to work on this. What's happened to me here? I don't think those things help. And if we had enough time, I would say there's also touch and what happens with the body and things like that we could work on. Maybe another year we can do a keynote and practice that. Practice touching. Yes.
Can I go next?
Yes. Oh, where are you?
Hi.
I'm sorry. Yes, thank you.
Hi, my name is Ricky, and I'm a student at the University of Nebraska. And my question is that usually in critique, we have a very limited amount of time, especially if there's a lot of students in that class. Yeah. And what's your advice on handling that time the best that we can?
Right, and also I just want to say again to teachers, critical response is time consuming, and you have your wonderful own methods and all that. However, one thing with critical response is that if everybody knows it, then you can divide up and you can do longer critiques, but you, the teacher, are not in every one of them. Or you're only in some of them, and or sometimes we try things like you only do the first 2 steps, or you can experiment with things like that. But maybe too, we want to say when in the course of a semester do we do a full-on critical response, and someone gets that full 30 minutes or 20 minutes, and when not. But mostly, I feel like the process themselves, you can share the weight of the critique more. Because of that, because everybody knows it and can work with it. I do want to say that we don't have time to get too much into all of this, but I noticed for myself as a teacher, now that I'm teaching at a university, it's been interesting as opposed to just giving master classes, that I'm really struggling with when do I want to critique and when do I want to use curriculum. Like very often when I want to start fixing things, what I'm feeling like I should do is teach, not critique. And if I have that nimbleness and I can pull back and say, oh, look, they don't know that thing, and rather than fix it or try to ask them a million questions. I should teach a workshop the next class that addresses that thing and see if that works. And I don't know how that plays out in your worlds, but that's been interesting to me to observe just this semester. We have time for like 2 more, and then we have to move on. Yeah.
Hello, my name is Lanaya.
I met you.
Yes, we did. I wanted to ask a question that wasn't just about the critical response, but more about your life. And what is the thing that you've created that you are most proud of?
Well, I would say probably, because I believe in multiplicity, I wouldn't say that I was the most proud of anything, but proud of some things. And one of them is learning how to stand up to my friends. Like, I think it's really hard when we make art. We get caught up in the trends and in what's going on around, and trying to really find the thing that I really believe in and then pushing on that is really a challenge. And when I'm able to do it, I feel pretty good. And I guess the other thing is advocating for both the birthright of every human being to be creative, and at the same time to challenge people to do better.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lanai. Last one.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm Anissa from the University of Hartford, and I've experienced in a critique someone who has presented a work on a piece of scrap wood that was just found in the studio because of lack of care, and that lack of care was known going into the critique. So how could you apply this methodology to someone who might not have as deep a care?
Well, first of all, you still have to do step 1. And that's so interesting for us. It doesn't have to be that's the greatest thing I ever saw. Step 1 may be something like, it's a curious piece of wood that you picked up. But you have to do that. But then I want you to work on what is the opinion that we're hearing here and what might be a neutral question to get at the nature of caring. Can you talk about what's important to you in this piece of work? Who in your life has informed you about what's important? How do you measure caring in your life? On a scale of 1 to 10, where does this piece land in terms of what you care about? What if the person says, well, I'm working on being carefree, and I've decided for the next year that every single piece I make is going to be careless and carefree. Okay. So now you have some information, and this is what I mean about that neutral question, right? Because now you have step 4. Well, I have an opinion about that. There you go. You get right, yeah. Okay. So you guys, thank you. I'm gonna end with that. Would be a good ending, but I just want to tell you one really fast story about Stu Kestenbaum in Haystack, because I can't be here for his honorary, and I'm so sad that I can't be. But it kind of goes with what we've been talking about. But Stu started those things in the middle of the summer when they had 3 days, and they would come and have conferences. And the one he asked me to come to was on risk. And I got to be on a panel with Sugata Mitra, who is an amazing Indian physicist, who you may know simply because you might know the story, but he's the one who put the computer in the wall. And then these kids from the streets came, and within 8 hours, they had figured out how to use the computer, and they were starting to teach themselves English. And he called these things self-organizing learning environments. And what he told us when he told the stories, he said, once I watched the kids doing that, I realized, they need grandmothers. So he got online and he went to all these retired school teachers in England, and he got like 400 retired school teachers within a week who were going to give these kids 1 hour of time a week on their newly installed computer in the wall. And he said the reason he wanted grandmothers, he says grandmothers do 2 things. And remember, this is in relationship to risk. They do 2 things. They say yes, and they say keep going. And that I love, and it feels totally appropriate to your 50th. So, thank you.